We are a group of friends, bound by our appreciation for liberty and good podcasting. Free-minded thinkers from all walks of life, our values come together with one accord to discuss the common culture and news of the day, along with whatever random crap is going on in our lives. Welcome to the Union of the Unknowns.
Hi, how's everyone doing tonight? Ism can't here. I have a special episode for you tonight. I'm joined tonight by the lovely Jackie.
Hola.
The lovely Ashley, Think Change Repeat.
Hello.
And our token Brit, not to be confused with JRR token, Terry from Canary.
Good evening.
So what I have for us tonight is what I'm going to appropriately just call the DrugCast. We're going to touch on a wide range of topics here. Basically everything to do with drugs, the good, the bad, the ugly, the amazing, the fun, the dangerous, the deadly. Hopefully, we only have an hour. Hopefully I'm going to get to all of this. So let's go ahead and have a start at it. And what I wanted to touch on first, and please everyone feel free to jump in here because I got a lot of numbers and everything. Some of these numbers are going to be from the UK, some of them are American. It's really hard to find documented data on a lot of this stuff. But where I wanted to start was with just the tragedy of what we're doing to our children as far as giving them prescription medications. So when a lot of people think of drug, they're thinking of heroin and meth and the illegal substances. But keep in mind, drug is really just anything that has an effect on your body, whether it's ibuprofen, heroin, Adderall, caffeine, sugar. These are all drugs. But what's really alarming are the number of children that we're giving these mainly amphetamines. That's where I started this. The overprescription of amphetamines to children, and then I came across some staggering numbers about giving children antidepressants. We were all kids here. Can any of you imagine being 8 years old and being depressed? I mean, you might have a bad day here and there, but that's not what depression is.
Yeah, that's crazy.
So some quick numbers. Let me pull this up real quick.
Can I ask you a quick question? Why are they prescribing amphetamines to children? What's the diagnosis there?
So the diagnosis is ADD or ADHD, attention deficit disorder or attention deficit hyper disorder respect.
Why don't we give amphetamines for that? Wow.
Because life is too easy in these first world countries, and instead of actually sitting down with our children and figuring out what's really going on with them, I mean, in a lot of cases it's just kids being kids. They're going to school, they're sitting in a classroom for 8 hours a day, 10 hours a day, and they want to be kids. That's the only time in life where you're bursting with energy. They don't want to sit still and listen to boring lectures hour after hour.
Particularly true of boys, right? There's a sort of overall war on boys that seems to be going on because they don't like the fact that they
absolutely
can be jumping about and
and it's definitely boys are diagnosed with ADHD or ADHD more than women. So let me throw some numbers out here for you. So about 6.1 million children in the United States, and this was last updated July 13, 2022, from the attitudemag.com. I will have Terry included in the show notes. About 6.1 million children in the United States, that's almost 10% of kids, between ages of 2 and 17 are estimated to have ever been diagnosed with attention deficit hyper disorder or attention deficit disorder, ADHD or ADD, according to a 2016 study from the CDC. In this percentage, 388,000 or 2.4% of these young children are aged 2 to 5. 2 to 5. They are being diagnosed with a disease that is prescribed literal amphetamines for. 2.4 million, or almost 10%, are of school-age children 6 to 11, and another 3.3 million, which is almost 14% of adolescents 12 to 17. But that, to be fair, this is just being diagnosed. It's not necessarily giving them drugs to treat it. So for that, we have about 75% of children with ADHD in the US undergo some type of treatment. 31% receive ADHD medication, which is amphetamines. So basically the theory is that amphetamines are going to have kind of the opposite effect of someone that doesn't have ADD, which is, to kind of focus them more. I believe if you don't have ADD, then you're kind of more scattered all over the place on them. I was diagnosed with ADHD as a kid. I'm still not sure if it's made up or not. I can't say when I was a kid and I would have a cup of coffee, it really would focus me, and I wouldn't be like, just going wild. But that's, so 31.7% of children with ADHD receive medication, amphetamines, and behavioral treatment. So that's at least something. So behavioral treatment, that's going to be, sitting down with a psychiatrist or shrink and, like, hey, what's going on? Are you acting out for any, like, is something horrible happening into your life that needs, taken care of, or are you just a kid with too much energy? And then here's 30% take ADHD medication only. That means that 30% out of these 10 million kids are just being thrown pills. Hey, take this and shut up. And then, I was putting all this together. I didn't think I was going to get as depressed as I am about it.
It is very depressing.
Yeah. And I can say personally, when I was growing up, and I was diagnosed with ADHD, like, that was really something serious that my mom considered. And it was kind of like, I took it a few times, like, I don't really like this. And she never, pressured me or asked me to again. And then I got into my teenage years and someone told me that you can abuse them. And then that, whole nother story there. It's an of age, consenting adult. There could be a lot of benefits, if not just, having a fun time over it.
Well, and not to put you too much on the spot, Justin, and if you don't know, maybe Terry does, but what are some of the effects associated with being put on that medication at that young of an age? Do we know? I mean, has there been studies done? Is there critiques done?
Do you mean like long-term side effects?
Yeah, or I mean, maybe even short-term side effects of, like, what does it potentially do? Like, maybe it affects the prefrontal cortex, or maybe, stuff like that we may not be aware of.
Well, I can't tell you that just in general. So amphetamines are addictive by their nature, both physical and mental addiction, which, a mental addiction is basically just like you're craving it. Like, I need something. A physical addiction is your body craving it. So it's, if you remove this if you aren't taking it anymore and it's removed from your body, you're going to be suffering physical withdrawals, which can be anywhere from just, kind of being a little anxious all the way up to basically flu-like symptoms, to where, you're having cold sweats, hot sweats, you can't get comfortable, you can't sleep, vomiting, diarrhea, the whole gambit.
Right? I mean, heroin is the classic example of that, I think. And I think heroin withdrawal can kill you if it's really severe.
So I believe you're thinking of benzos, which is a class of drugs that's going to include, Xanax, Klonopin, really anything with a pin at the end of it. is typically going to fall under benzodiazepine.
Right.
So, and those are the two most dangerous types of drugs in the world, is benzos and alcohol, because these are the two types of drugs that where if you do stop taking it cold turkey, death is a possible side effect. And a lot of people do not realize this. Jordan Peterson actually had a benzo addiction where he actually had to go into treatment for his withdrawals. And if I remember correctly, they actually put him in a coma for an extended period of time, because that's just how bad the withdrawals are.
Yeah.
And then if you just, just the list of side effects for amphetamine, granted, this is amphetamine. Most of what we're prescribing kids are not amphetamines. I mean, amphetamine is a specific drug. But the drugs that we're prescribing are like Adderall, Ritalin, methylphenidate. They aren't amphetamine per se, but they have the same brain mechanisms as amphetamine does. And
it's interesting they prescribe stimulants for, you'd think that would have the opposite effect, because, to my mind, someone with ADHD would need something like a tranquilizer to keep them sort of still and focused. It's kind of, yeah.
And that's really what makes me wonder if it is real or not, because it really does tend to focus people that actually have it than people that don't. But at the same time, it is very dose dependent. So if you do take too much, you're still going to be pretty scatterbrained and what's the word I'm looking for? Like tweaked out.
Yeah.
Because
is it something they're just doing to deal with troublemakers in the classroom and try and keep them in line? Because they've given the teachers an easier life, basically.
So, in my humble opinion, what I believe is that there is actually a brain mechanism that creates ADD, and it is a real thing. However, I believe that this is a minority of the population, and we are just throwing these drugs at the kids just to get them to sit down and shut up, regardless of whether if 10 million kids have this disease, then something's gone horribly wrong in humanity.
Yeah.
So I do believe that it is a real thing. However, I also believe that this is being wildly irresponsibly overdiagnosed. Just as it's just really the easy button.
I can tell you that when my godson, who's in his mid to late 20s now, was in elementary school, they wanted to put him on Ritalin. And I told his mom, because I was helping to raise him at that time, but I told his mom, no, we're not going to put him on that. He doesn't need that. They just didn't even call in for have a therapist to have talk to him. He dealt with being hyper because he was a young boy. And then also he had issues with his ears, so it was hard for him to hear. And so he probably could have been getting frustrated because of that. And so it was just kind of crazy, but I'm so thankful that we, at that time, were strong enough and told the teachers no, and just weren't okay, we'll just accept whatever diagnosis that you're giving and then drug him and make him into a walking zombie,
Yeah.
Well, and it is estimated that nearly 2/3 of children with ADHD have at least one other condition. And about 45% of those is going to be a learning disorder. So even dyslexia, anything like that.
Right, which I got him a tutor around that same time as well.
Right, and it's a lot of these things are just so widely overdiagnosed. A lot like antidepressants, which is back to the 2/3 having another condition. 32.7% of children with ADHD are reported to have anxiety problems. Another 16.8% have depression. And 1.2% have Tourette syndrome. And children with ADHD are 12 times more likely to have loss of control eating syndrome, a type of eating disorder similar to binge eating in adults, which I really believe that a lot of these issues are actually a cause from the drugs that they're taking.
I was going to ask that question.
Right. So if you pull up the side effects of amphetamines, anxiety is listed as a common side effect. Depression, mental depression, listed as a common side effect. It doesn't have Tourette's listed as a common side effect, but it's one of those things where you're screwing with a growing child's brain, and you're making the brain and the body function faster than it should. So I could totally see Tourette's being an issue from that as well. And the loss of eating control syndrome, I just have to assume. So I'm sure everyone knows that amphetamines and stimulants are appetite suppressants. But the body is an amazing thing. So once the effects wear off, you're going to be starving.
Yeah.
So what do you do when you're starving? You sit down and you eat a bunch of food. So if you're on amphetamines and these are your forming years as a child, basically what you're going to learn is you take a pill before school, maybe you eat a small lunch or something, and then you're probably going to take another one after lunch, and then probably around dinner time, that's probably when a lot of these drugs are going to be starting to wear off, and you're starting to get really hungry because your body is running at like 2 times speed. So you're also burning way more calories and doing a lot more stuff. So you're learning in your formative years that basically you binge eat once a night. So that it totally makes sense to me as just like, one after another right there.
I was going to say, stealing Ashley's thunder a bit, because she often talks about this, that I bet they're not really looking into the underlying cause of these things, if it is a real thing, because kids are exposed to a lot of toxins in the environment, toxic environment in their schools, which is fucking up their minds and their spirits. So and let's bring up the V word again. A lot of kids are getting
vagina
right and center now with toxic substances in there. So maybe this is screwing up their brain, but possibly what might do more benefit for them is maybe getting them out in the fresh air into the countryside and doing some exercise and some sport. I don't know, old-fashioned sort of stuff.
Well,
building friendships.
You'll hear, if I remember correctly, Owen Benjamin has the story of the doctors wanting to put his kids on ADHD medication. And if you guys aren't familiar with the Owen Benjamin story, basically he went out in the middle of nowhere, bought a farm, and started homesteading. And now his kid is he's out there learning as they're out on the property being with nature, and that seems to have really taken care of it. But again, we're just back to it's just easier, take a pill and shut up.
Yeah,
it's really gross.
Fiona and I, my wife, often talk about this, and we, like I was saying earlier on, it's often boys that are targeted for this behaviour because a lot of them don't really want to sit still in a classroom and be talked at all the time, or so getting them out on the farm doing sort of active stuff and looking after chickens might be just the thing for these sort of boys. Everyone's different, and some personalities run to more an active lifestyle than others.
And that's a big problem with the public school, is that even if you don't have ADHD, you're still learning as fast as the dumbest kid in your class.
Yeah, that's right.
And I remember in the 8th grade, I had a social studies teacher, and for 50 minutes every day, it was just come in, sit down, and write notes off a projector for 50 minutes.
Yeah, yeah. I know those sort of ones.
Like 8th grade is what, 12, 13?
Like 14.
Like
It's 13.
It's just
It's
crazy.
13. Freshman is 14.
It's just crazy what they're expecting kids. And now it's coming out that while we spend more capital per student than any other country in the world, we have some of the worst results. An alarming number of children coming out of school can't read at a 3rd grade proficient level.
Yeah.
And granted, I don't think this is necessarily has to do with drugs. I think that's, you know, a side tangent. I think it's just really the failure of the public school system and incentives to add more administrators, and just, you know, checking off kids so that the school still gets funding, the teacher gets good numbers, and you don't have parents complaining and yada, yada, yada.
Yeah. But it is to do with drugs in that you're not going to drug your way out of this, the issues that the schools have. You know, drugging the children is not the answer.
Well, and
Right.
what's
Unless you
interest-
want to create compliant little slaves, in which case it's doing a great job.
And
Yeah.
what's interesting is in other places, I believe in China, they've done studies. And look, I'm not going to lie to you guys, but I may not be right all the time. But I do believe that China showed that children that were taking ADHD or amphetamine medications, they actually score significantly higher on tests than kids that did not. So it really is one of those things where it's dangerous, man. Because who doesn't want their kid to come home with, you know, look, I got all straight A's, look how smart I am, that you know, then the parents like, oh, you know, that confirms me being a good parent. And, you know, it's a wild cycle. And it's really a gross topic.
It is.
So, and like I believe I stated at the beginning that it's kind of hard to pull exact specific numbers, because it's something that I don't think that they want to be documented that well. But I pulled this from the United Kingdoms. It was pulled by a FOIA request. For antidepressants, children 5 to 12 years old, between the year 2015 and 2021, it had gone up 40%, which is a terrifying number. So percentages, it's only 1,300 to 1,800 children, but these are 5 to 12 year olds. They shouldn't have that shouldn't be the case. If they had some sort of underlying trauma, like if they were molested or, you know, anything like that, throwing a drug at it isn't going to work. You got to put in the work. But that's a 40% raise. So starting when they locked down for COVID, 0 to 17-year-olds. So I couldn't find a lot of info on this stat because it sounds like we're putting babies that are between being birthed and their first birthday. They wouldn't have put it down as 0 to 17 if there wasn't at least one child under the age of 1 that was getting antidepressants.
Yeah.
28,000 kids are now on antidepressants after lockdown began. That is, I can't even begin to figure out the math to work out that percentages. Maybe like a 2,000, 3,000%. It's insane. And let's talk about the side effects of antidepressants. So first of all, we don't even know the mechanisms for how antidepressants work. It's basically one of those things, like, I think everyone knows the story about Viagra. It was started out as a medication for blood pressure. It didn't work. And then people started reporting like, hey, doc, something's working down here. So we have no problem with throwing just take it and see what happens. Basically, what we've thought of over the last decades is that basically you have serotonin and dopamine levels in your brain. Depression, kind of breaks the receptors and unregulates them, so you aren't able to produce serotonin like someone that's not depressed is. So a lot of these antidepressant medications are what's called SSRIs, or selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. So basically, instead, Terry, please correct me if I'm wrong here, because
you're right.
I believe what happens is that the serotonin that your brain is trying to get rid of is actually trapped back in that receptor. So you just build up serotonin, and that's theoretically what makes these drugs work. And that's why they can take, 30, 60, 90 days to work, because you got to have that time to build up the serotonin receptors.
Can I say something on that?
Please.
That is, you're right. That is the conventional explanation of what's happening. There's never been very good evidence for that, and there's been some recent studies sort of completely debunking that idea. That and there's also been research done that, like I was talking earlier on, that, for example, walks in the countryside are more effective than SSRIs.
That's exactly where I was going.
Right.
It's coming out now. I think everyone's, at least the competent professionals, have always kind of known, but it's been known for a long time that exercise, eating right, taking care of your gut health, these are all things that have had much more beneficial effects than antidepressants. And I'm not convinced that antidepressants aren't just a placebo effect.
No. Well, they have a lot of side effects, so they're doing something. And like you say, there are bad side effects, one of which is suicidal thoughts, isn't it? And the suicide rate amongst young people has been going up and up.
And that's
mainly possibly because they're on SSRIs.
Exactly. And so, well, just let me get this out of the way real quick. My favorite side effect of antidepressants is something called brain zaps. Brain zaps. So basically, it's like your brain is being electrocuted.
Oh, man.
That sounds healthy.
Yeah. Man,
but yeah,
that reminds me of when they used to like electrify the people. What was it when they used to have psychiatric wards, and then they would go through like those they would try to like
electric therapy.
Electroshock.
Yeah, electroshock therapy. I mean, it really goes down to what was it called when they'd like stick a spike up your nose and scramble your brains?
That sounds good. Brain scrambling.
That was the same person that did the electrotherapy, I think.
Yeah, it's killing me that I can't remember what it's called.
But they realized
lobotomies.
That...
Lobotomies.
Yes, that's what I was thinking of. Yeah.
It really feels like all the same shit. But yeah,
they just transformed it into drugs instead of something physical, because it's easier for people to accept.
Oh yeah, you don't have to pay for rent on a property. You don't have to pay for 100 doctors. You don't have to pay for security. You just send them home with a bottle of pills. Way more cost effective. Especially,
you're creating somebody that is now in the pharma pipeline, right? Because if you are on that medication, then you need to be on that medication every single day, or, some people will play around with it and figure out what works for them, but most of the time that's what it is. And then depending on the half-life of the medication, and specifically with SSRIs here, you could be dealing with something that has a really short half-life. So if it can get out of your system quickly, but it it's like it doesn't leave the mind quickly. And that is where like a sertraline or generic Zoloft is one with a shorter half-life. So it actually will get out of your body faster, but you can get the brain zaps really badly. I was on that one for a long time. And I sometimes, even if I forgot to take it for one single day, then I would feel the zap feeling. And it's very, very, very bad. So I ended up,
Sounds terrifying.
it was awful. It makes you feel horrible. So what I finally did was I decided that I thought that antidepressants were bullshit. And so I was going to get off of this. And I had tried before, but I felt very bad. So what I ended up having to do is way slow roll, like slow walk myself off of this. So before, when I had tried it, I had gone with the recommendation of a nurse practitioner. And she recommended over, a month or something like that, like this week reduce here, this week reduce here. And that was not effective for me. I felt very, very bad. So then when I tried to do it again, I ended up slow rolling it. This was probably over a time frame of 2 years. And I mean, I even got to the point where I was cutting, I would 1/4 it, and I think even finally cut it into an 1/8, where I was doing like 12.5 milligrams of generic Zoloft every other day before I got off of that. And I still felt like I had suffered side effects of like not feeling well for months after that. And there's there's just a lot of other side effects too. Like the big reason is because it doesn't fucking treat depression.
No.
I
was going to say, my wife went through the same thing. She was on fluoxetine for a long time, thinking that would help with her MS, which it didn't really. Well, it may have done something, but we decided in the end she should come off them. And like you say, they were a real bugger to get off. And she tried to come off quickly like you did, and got on really badly. We looked up protocols on the internet, and we're having to sort of, like you say, slow roll it. I think we took maybe a couple of years to get her off it as well. And she, feeling bad sometimes. They're hellish to get off.
Yeah. So, and I think, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, we were talking off air about, sometimes when you're addicted to drugs, they're making changes in your body so that you can't just come off them. And even if the drug is not in the system, you've got some sort of dependency on them. So
yes.
Because it even goes for like if you're taking testosterone, once your body starts getting getting these hormones or chemicals from somewhere other than what it produces naturally, your body learns it can save energy not producing these hormones or chemicals anymore, because it's already going to get added to it. So once you stop taking these chemicals that your body doesn't produce naturally, it's going to take some time for your body to actually get the receptors to start functioning again.
Yeah.
Because like a lot of these are mind altering drugs that actually physically change how your brain works.
Yeah.
The good news is that the human body is an amazing, like, if you don't believe in God, just look at how amazing the human body is at healing itself. It is insane. But it's gonna take some time. And if you're on antidepressants, if you want to get off, don't just stop taking these drugs.
Right. Don't do cold turkey at all.
You might not have a bad time. You may get suicidal thoughts and think it's a good idea to kill yourself, to kill other people. It is not good. And that this should just be a testament to how powerful these drugs are in general.
That's true. And they prescribe them like water. Sorry, Terry.
I was just going to say, this was something we also mentioned offline, that I'd be very interested to know how many of these mass shooters are on these sort of drugs. And that never comes up.
Yep, that was going to be the next point, is this SSRI to mass shooter pipeline.
And I don't know where I've heard or seen it, but I believe that almost every mass shooter has been on some sort of psychotropic drug, like Xanax or Zoloft, any of that's not how your brain works. Like, suicidal thoughts is not an acceptable side effect.
Correct.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But yeah, and it's, I think all the way going back all the way to Columbine, I'm pretty sure these are all children that have been on some sort of psychotropic drug that has altered how their brain functions. It's a societal problem, it's a pharmaceutical problem, it's a parenting problem, it's an education problem.
Oh, the other thing that I was going to say too is that back to dealing with the side effects of SSRIs, I think that this could be intentional also, because maybe it does make the population more sedate. So you're creating lifetime customers, which we know that they want. You're creating a more compliant society, which we know that they want. And then also, I think it also ties back into the war on family, because I believe that it reduces libido and it can sometimes cause permanent damage to sexual function of people. And there's even, groups on Reddit and stuff like that about people who have dealt with this issue. It's something sexual dysfunction. I cannot remember the name of it right now, but people who have taken these SSRIs and then they get to the point where they cannot really function sexually anymore. It's a real problem for them, especially their relationship.
Is it impotence?
No, it's not impotence. It's called something else. But basically,
it's probably called hell for men.
For sure. I mean, it's definitely similar to that though, because it completely derails their sex life for them, which is a huge,
I think a lot of it, and this is just me talking out of my proverbial ass, but I think a lot of it's just you're slapping a Band-Aid on top of a gunshot wound.
Yeah.
So like, who hasn't? So I hope I'm not spilling the beans here, but when men have sex, a lot of the times we'll try and think of something completely horrible in order to last longer. So that's kind of my example of how the brain interacts as far as sex goes. So like have you guys ever heard that the brain is like the biggest sexual organ on your body?
That's what I say. Yeah.
So it's like your brain controls everything. So when you're messing with what your brain does, you're messing with everything.
Yeah, I definitely think that there is something to why they want people on these medicines and why they have made it so easy to prescribe. And if you look at people, like in my field, I'm able to see a lot of times if someone is on a medication because it needs to be a consideration for my job. And a lot of people are on SSRIs, a lot of people. And I think that, like, back to what you're saying, Justin, as far as a Band-Aid on a bullet wound, something that the good Dr. Paul says a lot is that we live in a financially bankrupt society, but we also live in a morally bankrupt society. And I feel like we're now in this feedback loop spiral of that, because it's actually restoring the family and family values. In a lot of cases, I think that can be healing, but we are continuing to stray further and further from that as we go.
It's kind of interesting. Sam Tripoli talks about this a lot, but like when they had all the supply chain shortages and stuff like that with the food and the baby formula and even just regular goods and services. But how come there doesn't seem to be any supply chain shortages on the drugs that they're and the
vagina
and all this stuff that they're funneling down our throats?
Yeah.
Or in our bodies. There's no supply chain shortages in that. They don't even talk about that.
For Adderall, there is now. There is a
really.
Yes, Justin knows more about this, I think, but there is apparently an Adderall shortage. And then this is the other thing. No, that's a great point, though. But the other thing is that a lot of the medication that is consumed here in the United States is actually made in China. So as they continue to sort of beat the war drums with BRICS and things like that, they're really setting the United States and probably the West at large to be in a very bad situation if things go south with getting your antibiotics and other medication from China.
Now that's very interesting. That reminds me of the old British tactic that they used in China. They got all the Chinese population hooked on opium and then tried to withdraw the supply to try and sort of disable the population. So maybe they're going to pull that okey doke on the US as well.
I would not be surprised if there was something, and I know a lot of people want to be on the side of assuming that the best of intentions are being used, but that's not where I operate from. So I operate from a place of that I'm expecting them to do the most damage possible with whatever they're up to.
So I don't know if I can call this a white pill. I'll call it a gray pill. So here's a fun fact for you fellas and ladies. There's antidepressants in your tap water.
Yes. Fluoride?
No. So I think it's a two-part issue is that, one, a lot of people just flush their old medications that they don't use.
Oh, yeah.
So birth control, antidepressants, all this stuff, it is actually in the water supply.
In fact.
Yeah, it affects the fish. It affects it's the whole circle of life. So between people just flushing it down the toilet, and the other thing is that a lot of these drugs don't entirely metabolize in your body. So as I know this is specifically true for birth control, is that if you're on birth control, not only is that just terrible, terrible, terrible for your body, but I'm a man. I'm not going to tell any woman what to do. I'm going to tell you, though, that you're ruining our water supply because you're pissing out birth control into the water, which is then recycled into drinking water and sold as Dasani, and it goes in all the food and everything else. So just be aware of what you're doing to the environment.
Yeah, you're right. I remember reading that there was, you could detect things like fluoxetine in the water because it doesn't get taken out in the water treatment plant.
Yeah, I mean, and I imagine, if you got like a triple filter system on your water supply, it's probably okay. But I think a lot of these things are going to keep building up as it's America is definitely the number one medicated country in the world, but I think all the other countries are starting to pick up on the uptake. Like as I pointed out before the COVID lockdowns in the United Kingdoms, it went from 1,800 children on antidepressants to over 28,000. Mm-hmm. So it's a coming. At this point, I'm not gonna call it a global conspiracy to give kids drugs so that everyone else ends up intaking them from the water supply. But I also believe that I have read articles from people suggesting that the governments add these things to the water, like they are already and have been doing with fluoride, in order to make a more docile population.
Yeah, and they want lifelong customers. They want people who are going to be getting medication from them every single month. And the other thing that I wanted to bring up just very quickly about birth control is that actually can affect a woman's choosing of her partner versus like women who are not on birth control would choose ex-partner, and then women who are on birth control, it's like it messes with the pheromones and the hormones of the body and things like that, and it's not, it causes changes.
Doesn't it just trick your body into thinking that you're pregnant so it doesn't create more eggs?
I don't know.
I don't think that there are two hormones that the woman produces when you get pregnant. I think the birth control pill is only using one of them. I can't quite remember, but I think that might be right.
You can
Is that-
have estrogen, progesterone,
Isn't
combination.
oxytocin one of them?
Oxytocin is the feel-good hormone, so that's not just associated with females, but estrogen and progesterone are, and those
Gotcha.
are components of birth control.
So you
If
can
I'm-
get a pill with both of those, can you?
You can get a pill with both, or you can get a pill that may only be like progesterone based. If you happen to have a sensitivity to estrogen, sometimes it will make you sick.
Can I ask you about IUDs? Is it basically the same thing, but just like like it just absorbs through a different way?
So I'm not 100% sure, but
Transdermally, that's what I was looking for.
I believe that yes, that some of them IUDs can be hormonal, but I also believe that some of them are not
Some
emitting.
of them are mechanical, yeah.
Right.
In the old days, I had a girlfriend with an IUD, a mechanical one, and I think it's kind of mysterious. I think it sort of works when they don't really quite know how. But it didn't involve any chemicals. It was
Right.
just a pure
It's
mechanical thing.
right. It's not affecting the hormone level at all. So I think there's some of both out there.
Well, I think one of the side effects of IUDs is death. So I'm just gonna throw out there a quick suggestion, take it or not. Human Resources has also suggested this. But if one of the possible side effects of a medication is death, maybe don't take it.
Yeah.
I mean, talk with your doctor first. I mean, here's what I find with doctors. If you care, they'll care. But most people are just looking for a quick answer. They don't want to do any work. But if you talk to your doctor, I think a lot of the times they'll be like, oh, well, if you're actually willing to go to the gym once a week, you know, like work with your, like if you're on antidepressants, talk to your doctor. It's going to take a lot. You want to wean off of them, take less and less over time, as Ashley was talking earlier. I don't know really anything about birth control. I really barely only know the basics about how women get pregnant, or how any of that. It's all gross.
Avoid pharmaceuticals, and then and I believe that Justin is being generous by thinking that your doctor will care.
If you got a decent doctor, I mean, like, try and build a relationship with your doctor.
Kind of hard to find.
Yeah, my faith in physicians, nurses, especially after everything that's happened over the last 3 years, they're, in my opinion, they're the enemy class. They're not to be trusted.
Let me put it this way. If you care about your health, your doctor is more likely to care about it. So like, as you know, Brad Binkley will tell you a lot. If you guys listen to the propaganda report, I know we're always talking about it. You probably get sick of it if you don't listen, but ask follow-up questions, like build a relationship. Because one thing's for sure, if you don't care, they definitely aren't going to care.
Yeah, you need to advocate, you need to be aware, and you need to be challenging what they are trying to do to you.
Yeah.
I'll tell you something. If I have a great relationship with my doctor, personal, and then with my mom's previous doctor who got wiped out by COVID, as a lot of his customers down here in South Florida were from Canada, right? So when Canada became a communistic country, they weren't able to come down anymore, right? A lot of the elderly people and stuff like that, and they had all the lockdowns and stuff. So anyhow, so when they had that, he lost it. So we got a new doctor, and they have terrible bedside manner. Terrible. It's all about the numbers. It's all about you can't trust them to care or do the right thing, and not even the front staff or anything like that. And so because of that, I am moving to I had to change my mom's insurance back to a PPO from an HMO. And I'm just so I could switch doctors and not have her at this practice anymore. So as of January, we're taking her to another place and actually taking her to the doctor's office. I was telling you about my friend that passed away last year from a brain aneurysm. So I wanted to say the rest, but I'm just not going to do that right now. Anyways, so, and the lady, when I mentioned her name, she was just absolutely amazing and super nice and stuff like that. And I was like, I don't care if I have to drive 20 minutes longer, it's worth it to go. It's worth it to have that doctor. That's one thing that I'm afraid about by leaving Atlanta, is like all the relationships I've built up within my where I get my car done and everything, and all these people that you trust to do the right thing. And it's like, crap, I'll be able to find it if I decide to move back here. But you know, it's just kind of crazy. But yeah, that's super, super important.
Well, I mean, myself, I don't go to the doctor. Like, if I get sick, I'm gonna, you know, have some chicken noodle and just relax. And, you know, like I said earlier, your body is amazing. It's gonna figure it out. I mean, if you got a broken bone or something, go to the doctor. Don't try and Reiki it. But I mean, I know that was a lot of black pilling for everyone, but I want to get to some white pilling.
It's about time.
That's just the great side of drugs. So I know we're in the age of COVID, so we've talked a lot over the week. So, you know, ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, drugs that actually save lives. Malaria is the #1 killer in the world still, and it is very easily preventative by a drug that costs pennies to pick up. But that's kind of boring. I wanted to get to something a little bit more fun. And that's more just the illegal drugs. So obviously, you know, I view drugs as a tool, just like a hammer. You can take a hammer and you can beat someone over the head with it, or you can take it and build a house with it.
Husband,
Well, I wasn't going to get to Nancy Pelosi's PP getting hammered, but I did think of it. So, and it's like, I'm going to start out on probably the hottest third rail, which is methamphetamine. And, you know, it's that not only once, you know, yada, yada, yada. Here's the thing though, man, like if we didn't this is all just my belief. I've been a drug advocate and user for most of my life. I am now 100% sober, exception cigarettes, alcohol, and kratom. But these are things that have had profound effects on my life. And it's one of those things where you just have to use it as a tool. So like methamphetamine, if you grow up in a culture where these things are respected, I'm going to go ahead and just throw out the Andes as a great example where the coca plant actually grows. So the coca plant produces what is extracted into cocaine. But what the locals do is they chew on the leaves with a little bit of lime. So the lime actually acts as a base acid, not a base acid, like base is in the opposite of acid, which makes the coca in the leaf more easily able to ingest into your body. And in these forms, it's really, I mean, anything can be addictive, but it's one of those things where used responsibly, it's a great way to get through a long shift, doing hard work. I'm not going to tell anyone to go out and use meth, but I'm just going to say that it's one of those things that has definitely been used responsibly throughout the years by people that can just take it, you know, I got to work a 30-hour shift doing whatever. And then the other third rail of the drug story is heroin. Right now, like the main problem with heroin right now is the fentanyl. So that's a whole nother route to go down as to where is this fentanyl coming from, because the one thing I can tell you is that drug dealers don't want to kill their customer base. No one wants to kill their customer base. But heroin is actually, when it was first discovered, it was one of the greatest medicines in the world because there was nothing else of that strength when it was created, or when it was, first produced from the opium.
What was it created for originally?
It's originally just a painkiller. So you have to remember, this is back before modern medicine. So if you get, a cut on your leg and it turns into gangrene, the solution for that is sawing your leg off. And not only is the process incredibly dangerous and painful, but shock is a real issue that if you go into shock, you can die from it. So being able to give someone heroin increase their chances of living. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think it was used as an anesthetic.
Yes,
as well.
it does.
Yeah, absolutely.
I still wouldn't want to take it though.
Well, and I think that's really one of this cultural and societal issues that we have, is that people aren't fundamentally happy and fulfilled. So I'm sure we've all heard of the study they did, I think in the 70s, maybe the 60s, where they took a rat and they put it in a cage, or maybe it was a mouse, I'm sorry. And there were two water bottles. One of them was just regular water. The other one was water laced with cocaine. And basically what would happen is that the mouse would keep taking the cocaine until it died. But later they redid that study and they said, well, like, that's not a mouse's natural environment. Why don't we create an environment for it where it has friends and activities and things to do? And what ended up happening was the mice, they would try the cocaine water, and they, it's kind of one of those things, like, they'd start taking it, but at the end of, the study, they stopped taking it because they would rather just spend time with, doing regular mouse stuff and not getting all jacked up on cocaine.
Eating cheese. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. They also did that experiment with sugar in water, and they found that they had the mice or the rats were doing the same thing. There was this hit in the sugar water all the time, and they found that it was having the same effect on the brain as cocaine, and that some people say that sugar is actually a stronger drug in terms of its effect on the brain than cocaine.
Well, it's definitely harder to quit, especially in today's age where literally everything has some form of sugar in it.
Yeah.
So I didn't want to spend too much time on stuff like that. I kind of wanted to delve a little bit more into psychedelics. So there's actually great work being done by people like Rick Dublin of the MAPS Association, which is the multidisciplinary association for psychedelic research. And that's actually one of the things that's helped like psilocybin mushrooms be legalized in places like Colorado, is that it's able to change how you're able to perceive things. So one of the big things that they've done with it is PTSD with soldiers coming back from wars. And they've been doing also similar research with MDMA, commonly known as ecstasy. And then there's even depression treatments that you can go and take with ketamine. Ketamine, it's not horse paste, but it is used as horse tranquilizer. So it's really just one of those things where, like I said before, drugs are like a tool, man. You can use them to build something great, or destroy something great. And a big trend right now is people doing like microdosing every day. I don't know if I would recommend that. Like, again, it is changing your brain's chemistry. So that's probably not something you want to always do. And that leads me to dimethyltryptamine, DMT, ayahuasca. It is actually, at this point, a multi-million-dollar business, if not a multi-billion-dollar business, of people going to South and Central America and spending time with shamans, where they give you an ayahuasca drink, which is a mixture of DMT plants that contain DMT, as well as plants that contain what's called a MAOI, which is a monoanidase oxate inhibitor, if I remember correctly, which is an enzyme in your stomach that actually breaks toxins down. But one of the other things that it breaks down is dimethyltryptamine. So unless you take this SSRI with the DMT, you're not going to be able to feel any effects from it. But once you take dimethyltryptamine, people will tell you that you're not just high, but you're in another dimension. You're in the spirit realm. And everyone has very similar experiences. And people have used it for everything from a cure for depression, quitting cigarettes, quitting drugs, quitting alcohol, anxiety, any number of things that ail humans in their spiritual selves.
Yeah, it's very interesting. One idea is that it sort of gets your intellectual part of your brain out of the way, so that you can, which is why you can access the spirit world, because it leaves the sort of spiritual part of your being intact, but dulls down the bit that's the sort of voice in your head that gets in the way of things like meditation, that says, well, you should be going to do the shopping now, really.
Yeah, that's what I really always enjoyed about drugs, is that you're able to convince your brain to do things that it wasn't previously capable of. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So, and a great example of this is a lot of important human discoveries have happened from LSD.
Sure.
So we have Francis Crick, who was a Nobel Prize winner, who actually first identified the double helix structure of the DNA. So I can't, if you don't know what a DNA double helix looks like, you just have to Google it. I can't try and explain it to you, but it's something that Crick was only able to figure out thanks to LSD, because it does open up your brain to perceiving information in a different way. And then Carey Mullis, RIP, who invented the polymerase chain reaction, which, feel as you will about it, in 2022, with PCR tests, that couldn't, it really is an amazing breakthrough in technology, and it couldn't have been possible without Crick's identification of the double helix thanks to LSD.
And Carey Mullis never intended that to be virus detection.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's all hogwash.
He was a good guy.
Like,
he hated Fauci as well.
Yeah, kind of an anti-establishment guy.
It really makes you wonder if he died of quote unquote natural causes.
Doesn't make me wonder.
And then, I'm also, speaking of the lizard people, I didn't know this until I started doing a little bit of research for this topic. Bill Gates mentioned in a Playboy article that he wouldn't have been able to do what he did with Windows without the help of LSD.
So
Well,
LSD told him to steal somebody else's shit.
Yeah, he ripped it all off from Xerox.
I'm just telling you what was reported by the great orders of journalism at Playboy.
I think he's just trying to be down with the cool kids. There's certainly a lot of writers and musicians, though, haven't they, been inspired by LSD.
I thought he tried to sell it to Xerox and they said no.
Yeah, he probably did. Yeah.
He stole it from somebody. He didn't come up with it on his own.
But
No,
yeah.
Philip K. Dick, a great science fiction writer who I love, who's behind a lot of science fiction films. His stories, he was very famously on acid most of the time he was writing.
Who was that?
Philip K. Dick.
Oh, yeah. Something about electric sheep.
Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? Yeah, that's kind of became Blade Runner.
Oh, okay.
He's also Minority Report and what else? Quite a few films.
Well, and I know that I rambled on there for a few minutes, and I'm by no means a scientist or anything. I'm just someone that has a passion for learning the mechanisms of a brain. I've done a lot of research into it. I would say, does anyone have any questions that I might be able to answer about anything drug related?
It's certainly a very interesting topic. I find it very interesting. I mean, I'm very interested in how the brain works as well. I think my attitude to drugs would be more like Monica Perez, another propaganda report connected illuminist, in that, not an Illuminati, in that I think I would prefer to go with the natural substances, see if it's like like eating the coca plant, like you were saying, or the marijuana leaf, or not the ayahuasca drink. I suppose is kind of a bit treated, but the trouble with these pharmaceutical extractions is you're not getting the whole plant and the cofactors that your body might have evolved to deal with very well, so that when you're drinking beer, for example, it's got alcohol in, but it's got a lot of other stuff. And, we've been drinking alcoholic drinks for hundreds, if not thousands of years. So we've possibly evolved to deal with it. Whereas, these new pharmaceutical drugs, our body may not have seen them in quite that form before. So they might not know quite what to do with them.
Well, and that goes all the way back to way back when the FDA approved a medication called Marinol, which is basically just like a THC pill. And I mean, before medicinal marijuana was a thing, that's what the anti-drug crusaders would say. Like, well, there's already medicinal THC. It's this patented drug that the pharmaceutical companies own. But there's hundreds of different chemicals in the marijuana plant. And granted, thanks to the war on drugs, it has gotten to a point where some strains of marijuana are up to 50% THC by weight. So back in, I'm sure, Terry's days, we're looking at more like a 2 to maybe 6% THC by weight, because marijuana is called weed because it was literally a weed. It'll grow anywhere. But over the decades, since it's not something that you can just throw a bunch of seeds out into your garden, people have started cultivating it, learning the science of how to modify. Basically, it's GMO weed. They've genetically modified it just by using science and nature to give it its exact conditions to grow, however it grows. That's how we have, CBD, and all this other stuff, because they figured out how to make this grow opposed to this. And then
it's so good.
And speaking of the naturals, like DMT has been found in the pineal gland of the brain. Some fascinating stuff about that is that it goes way back, symbology for the pineal gland, hundreds, if not thousands of years. So they kind of knew something about that. And that's a lot of people suspect that dreams are produced by DMT, near-death experiences, really anything where you have some sort of subordinary, extra vision or hallucination. And what the drug companies really hate are things like kratom and ibogaine. So kratom is actually, it hits the same receptors in your brain as opiates, but it is completely natural. It grows in Southeast Asia. And the FDA under Scott Gottlieb, well, he's not part of the FDA anymore, but they've been going state to state trying to ban it for years and years and years. The DEA tried to add it to Schedule 1 maybe a decade ago, and that was the only time they rescinded a recommendation for drug scheduling. That's how much blowback they had. Because these are life-changing drugs where Purdue will get you hooked on Oxycontin, and then this is a drug that you can take and wean yourself off of it without going through horrible withdrawals. And ibogaine is a powerful, powerful hallucinogenic drug that I do not recommend taking medicinally or outside of a medical setting. But it actually completely destroys the bonds in the brain for the receptors. So if you have alcohol, benzo, cigarette, whatever addiction, this is a substance that can instantly overnight break that addiction. Schedule 1 drug. Schedule 1 meaning it has no pharmaceutical relevance.
Yeah, I've read stories on that, but that was I was going to bring up the point that people have been able to get off of opiates that were addicted because they were using kratom.
Yes, that's how I stopped taking fentanyl. I mean, granted, now I'm addicted to kratom, but again, like I said, everything's addictive. But I take probably an excessive amount from time to time. But even if I don't take it, I just, I don't sleep great at night. That's about it. Which is a wild difference from fentanyl withdrawal, where you're laying on the floor flailing around in cold sweats.
Yeah, very sick.
I think we can agree there's an awful lot of hypocrisy associated with drugs, when they've got the majority of the people hooked on antidepressants or, giving them statins and, and yet making things like marijuana illegal or, heavily controlled when they're basically natural substances.
Yeah, it's don't take these drugs, take our drugs.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, because they're not gonna have a lifelong customer from you smoking your own weed, but they will if they put you on opiates or the antidepressants, things like that. I mean,
you will literally die if you stop taking benzos cold turkey. The withdrawal will literally kill you. And remember, we're talking about like Klonopin, Xanax. These are very commonly prescribed drugs.
Very common.
You just basically got to go to the doctor and be like, I'm not feeling great. Can I get some Xanax?
Yeah.
There was a comedy skit about John Mulaney on one of his things, and he talked about how he went to the doctor and he found out his friend said he had like a hurt leg or something and asked for Xanax. So then he went and then he said to the doctor, I've had a hard time peeing or something like that.
It was flying. He wanted the Xanax for a flight, I think.
Yeah.
Oh, I will recommend.
You can look it up on. You can listen to it on Pandora, or you can look it up probably on YouTube or whatever. But if you find that skit, it is freaking hilarious. The way that he describes it and stuff like that. And then when he's like, he talks about how they took his blood or something First of all, they did a rectal scan on him, rectal thing, and then they took his blood, and then he passed out. And then when he woke up and he was about to ask for Xanax, the nurse was like, "The doctor's gone. You need to go. It's closing now."
Well, and I will personally attest to, if you got a long flight, pop a Xanax, take down a couple glasses of wine. It's going to be the best flight of your life, because you're going to time travel. You're going to sit down, and then next thing you know, you're halfway across the world, and you're like, "Oh wow, how did I get here?"
Mhm.
But I think we're coming up against time. Does anyone else have any comments, questions, concerns?
I don't
Also,
think
Yeah.
so.
I'll
We
assume
sort
that.
of ran
Hey,
time, but
Justin.
I wanted, sorry.
Oh, sorry. So, no. Sorry, Terrence. I'm sorry.
I just wanted to mention whether Justin had seen the crazy plan that the US military had come up with to
Vagina.
their soldiers against fentanyl.
Oh, I saw that. I didn't see that it was for soldiers, but we had seen
Well,
that
I think it
article. We made fun of it in the Discord.
Yeah.
For against fentanyl?
Yeah.
Right. And so, I mean, I think that's kind of like calling the mRNA
Vagina. Vagina.
My
Yeah.
best guess on just knowing how opiates interact with the brain is that it's something along the lines of like Suboxone or Subutex, which is it's the new methadone. It's what they give opiate addicts. But the funny thing with that is that, so methadone you don't really get high off of. So that's why they give it to opiate addicts, because they can still, supposedly they're supposed to wean off of it over time. So that they're okay. And Subutex and Suboxone, it's a dastardly drug, man, because what it actually does is it bonds to the opiate receptors in your brain, and it has such a strong affinity with that receptor that if you were to take heroin or something else, it doesn't let those chemicals attach to that receptor. So you're not going to get high off of it. I'm not sure the mechanisms for how it works, but I do believe that if you were to take heroin while you're on Suboxone, you're actually going to go into withdrawals from it. The dastardly part is that it's more physically addicting than any other opiate on the market. So if you don't take it, with the heroin withdrawals you had are going to be 100-fold. So that's just right back to, you're just hooked on their drug for life.
Okay.
And did you have something you wanted to jump in with, Jackie?
I was just gonna, I don't think it's necessary now. I was just gonna ask you what you had kind of mentioned earlier, and just ask you, what do you think were the best two to take while you were, but I don't think we should advertise that on here. So never mind.
I checked with HR, and they cleared it. The absolute best drug I've ever taken in my life was heroin.
No, I didn't mean it for that. I meant for doing the naughty stuff.
Well, obviously it's the number one is ecstasy. It's called ecstasy for a reason.
Yeah.
And it's actually, a lot of people have died by, so ecstasy, like a lot of amphetamines, affects your blood pressure in certain areas. So you might need to take something like a Viagra to try and get functionality back. But there's a lot of risk to mixing these types of drugs. It is hell on your heart, and a lot of people have had heart attacks from it.
Yikes.
Talking about X?
Yeah. Ecstasy and Viagra.
Well,
Yeah.
definitely. Oh, don't do those, especially if you if you had the shot. Don't do it.
If
No
you die,
kidding.
they can't get the coffin lid down either of them.
Rigor mortis, right? But I'll say the best drug I ever tried in my life was heroin, and it was the only drug that I did a tiny little bump of it. And I laid in bed throwing up, and I was sweating profusely. And I was like, I understand why people give up their homes for heroin.
But
Wait,
you were,
you
but you
sick?
enjoyed.
You were
enjoyed
sick when
sweating
you
and
took
throwing
it?
up?
Yeah, it was amazing. 10 out of 10.
Wait, it made you sick and throwing up, and you're
Well-
saying that was 10 out of 10?
Just the throwing up wasn't great, but just the high that was there. So when you throw up from opiates, it's an indication that it's an overdose. But there's a range of overdoses. Like an overdose doesn't just mean death. It means
Correct.
that you took more than your body was comfortable dealing with. But yeah, I was throwing up, vomiting, and sweating, and it was the best feeling I've ever felt in my life.
Wow, in all the episodes of intervention that I've watched, I did not realize that it would make you sick after you took it. I thought it was with the withdrawals when people were totally physically addicted. That is when you would get sick.
That is also true, but opiates in general, like if you take too much from them, you will get sick to your stomach. I mean, that really goes for anything, because throwing up is really just your body's way of expelling any toxins,
Right.
But yeah, I did say mock like the not even once thing earlier, like heroin, probably don't even try that one. Luckily, it was just like a one-time connection. I could never make it again. So hallelujah, I'd be a heroin addict today. It's that good.
Well, praise God that that's not the case, Justin,
Definitely.
because then we wouldn't have you right now.
Well,
You wouldn't have the beautiful wife that you have.
Trust me, me and God had some talks on drugs.
I'm sure. So,
But
all
yeah,
right.
that's about it I had for you. I did want to just suggest a couple of series. If anything I said interests you, check out a series, Hamilton's Pharmacopoeia. It was done by Vice channel. And a more recent one, How to Change Your Mind on Netflix. But I've rambled for way too long. I know we're way over time. Ashley, can you tell everyone how to find us?
Yes, I will. And I also would like to shout out to Terry, because he has about a 5-hour time difference than us. So he is really pulling and burning the midnight oil for us. So thank you for doing that, Terry.
He's the real trooper.
He is. You are America's sweetheart, but Terry is our trooper, and we really appreciate him.
Well, I hope I at least made it entertaining for you.
Yes.
It's kind of like some kind of crazy fever dream I've been having, actually.
I'll take that as a compliment.
So you should.
Okay, so you can find us at unionoftheunknowns.com. That is our website, and that has a link to everything else. You can email us at unionoftheunknowns@gmail.com. You can leave a voicemail for us or hate mail for Justin, and that is 404-482-3130. And you can also find us at Union Unknowns on Twitter.
Well, I appreciate you all indulging me on my DrugCast. If anyone has any questions about drugs, legal or non, or pharmaceuticals, join us on the Discord. I'm happy to answer any questions. And thank you everyone for joining me for the topic. And
Yeah, thank you, Justin.
Thanks, Justin. Good job.
Thanks, Justin. Have
We'll
a good night, everyone.
We'll talk to y'all soon.
Bye, all.
Thank you for tuning in for another episode of Union of the Unknowns. You can find new episodes every week on all your favorite podcasting networks.